From Alameda, California, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents Flying High Over the Zone with the Zigzag Man.
I am back. You're flying high over the zone with me, the Zigzag Man, from Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco in the northern part of this great state. We're in the East Bay, down by the lagoon at the 420 studio, and I'm kind of flying solo as a host, but my guest is one of the podcasters from the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network that I founded more than a year ago. It's been about 18 months now, and I'm enjoying it. We're doing what I wanted to do all my life, which is simply educating people that haven't yet been born to what went on when I was a kid in baseball, and what's going on now, and what will be going on in the future in baseball. One of the mainstays of my network joins me today. He's from Massachusetts, originally from Brooklyn, New York. Ian Kahanowitz. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Anytime I get to talk baseball with you, Ralph, I'm doing fantastic.
Yeah, well, we are going to talk a little baseball today, but one of the things I wanted to do with you was do kind of a state of the nation for Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I want to bounce some things off you, give you a little history of how this got started. Early on, you yourself saw that what I'm doing is interesting. You did podcast stuff a while back, and you got into the idea that the spirit of Comfortably Zoned Radio was a good one. We're not interested in digging up dirt on ball players and the scandalous part of it. We're interested in the experiences, learning from them, the experiences that what it was like, basically, to play ball. And from the authors and the journalists we interview, we want to know what it's like to write a book, to cover sports. To the fans we interview, we want to know where their passion got started. And basically, that's what this network is based on. Passion for sports. Well, not just baseball. I'll get into that when we talk about the shows in a minute. But a passion for what you do in life, and all these people that I have as fellow podcasters all have in common that they love what they do. And that comes through so fiercely in their podcasts. And I'm really proud of the folks I put together. And Ian, I'm going to start with you. Give me a little bit of a background on how you developed your passion for sports.
Well,
in particular.
Well, I grew up in New York right in the 70s when the city was starving. And, I barely remember the 73 World Series between the Mets and the Athletics. My earliest recollection of any baseball was the 73 Yankees with the whole Fritz Peterson, Mike Kekich ordeal. It was all over the papers. And Fritz Peterson, Mel Stoudemire, Thurman Munson, Greg Nettles, and Roy White were the first 5 Yankees I ever knew. And I speak to Fritz Peterson probably once a week now. And I said, if you would have told me 45 years ago I'd be speaking to you, you'd be crazy. So my father was a big Yankee fan. He grew up in Brooklyn. He played baseball in high school. He played in the cab company he worked at. He always, had baseball around. Baseball and track were his two favorite sports. And for my father, he played first base as right-handed, and he taught me the love of the game. I used to sit, for many, many summers with my black and white TV with the antennas and the tinfoil around trying to get the Twin Towers to try to get WPIX in to watch, the Yankee games. And then, you had, Ralph Kiner and them on Secaucus 9. And so we were blessed living in New York to have two teams. Now, of course, I didn't really know about the Giants and Dodgers until I grew up a little bit, and I knew that they had come from New York, and there was a three-team, city for about,
What a bonanza that was, Ian, when I was growing up. I'm a little older than you, and we thought it was indeed a birthright to have the World Series played in our city as a kid. We were so spoiled all those years. 1949 to 64, a New York team, or in the case of 1959, the Dodgers, who were a New York team at the time, played in the World Series. It was crazy. Until 65, I think that went on. So it was great, and it was great for you. So I can understand how you did develop it. It was so easy with two teams. Imagine how it was with three teams. For me, the great rivalry between the Giants and the Dodgers. And the winner of that, you would think, went to the World Series to play the Yankees because they were pretty consistent. And the irony is, when the Giants did get to the World Series for the second time in the early 50s, they ended up playing and beating the Cleveland Indians. So great memories, and that's what the network is built on. I understand why you got into it. Let me tell you about some of the other folks who are podcasters on the network and some of the other shows that I have. I'm going to start with the Dodgers show. When I started doing this, I was just a guy doing podcasts. Most of them turned out to be baseball because that was my passion. But as though the folks that have followed me personally, my shows always incorporated sports and social injustice. I firmly believe that we have an unholy trinity of big business, government, and organized religion holding us back. And I'm quick to point that out. I was doing that and having an awful lot of fun for a while. And one day, I got to meet a fella by the name of Ron Rabinovitz. Not to be confused with a Kahanowitz. He's Rabinovitz with a V. And Ronnie is he was a friend of Jackie Robinson, personal friend. As a kid, Ronnie's dad knew Jackie, was an attorney, a civil rights attorney in Wisconsin, and when Ronnie started following sports and following baseball as a little kid, his dad got Jackie and Ronnie together, and they developed a lifetime friendship, a friendship that Ronnie celebrated. He's carried on to Rachel Robinson. Rachel remembers him well as a little boy, and Rachel was, over the weekend, just inducted into the Hall of Fame. And Ronnie was kvelling. If you guys, anybody out there doesn't know what kvelling is, go to the Yiddish translation on the internet. I can't tell you what it means, because some Yiddish words have no literal translation. But Ronnie was felling for Rachel Robinson, as well he should. Anyway, I did an interview with Ronnie, and I thought to myself, after the interview, I have no place to go from here. This was the greatest interview I ever did. I brought out things in him. He taught me things about Jackie. I hung up. I thought, I think I'm going to find something else to keep me occupied, because I can't top this. And Tally, my dear partner, looked at me and says, "You can't just quit. Well, you love this. Think about it for a day or so. Go to sleep. Think about this. Don't make any rash decisions." And I woke up with the idea that, no, I'm not going to quit. Instead, I'm going to bring people in to what I'm doing who can help me get the word out there that, A, baseball is a microcosm of life, and life is a microcosm of baseball, and that, as Charles Einstein, who wrote a book, Willie's Time, showed me and the world, that the two are closely intertwined. And so I started looking for ideas of bringing people in that can do shows of their own, and Ronnie was one of them that I brought into the network. But one of the first people was an avid Dodger fan, Peter Trunk, who is ironically exactly my age. And I'm an avid Mets fan now, but Giants fan growing up. Now, Peter is a Mets fan now. He's a Boston Red Sox fan in the American League. I waffle in the American League. I've gone from team to team for time to time. I follow different teams. I waffle. But our situation, Peter and I, we were friends a long time on before Facebook. We knew each other on a group called Baseball Fever, baseballfever.com. And they've changed their website. It's I don't know if they're basically the same, but when we got to know each other, we realized that we were both avid fans, and we suffered when our teams left when we were 10 years old. And we were fans to the point where Peter and I would talk uniforms and uniform caps. We talk crazy things about minutia, about what went on in the Giants and Dodger rivalry. So I thought he'd be a natural. Brought him in. We started a show that has evolved into him doing it. It was a Giant Dodgers show. It evolved to two separate shows, basically three, because we have New York baseball with Marty Rose, my boyhood friend, and Robert Denninger, who's the third man in the booth. We have that show. It evolved to Weighted Donuts, a show with Wayne Unger, a fellow who exhibits the same passion as you and I do, Ian, and as Marty Rose did, grew up in Jackson Heights, where I was from. And Marty's brother Bernie came on the Dodgers show, was on the Dodgers show for a long time. We have a big Jackson Heights contingency and a spirit of Queens, folks who grew up. You're from Brooklyn. Most of us were city people. We grew up basically talking ball all the time. That's what you did in New York. You were a Giant fan, Dodger fan, Yankee fan. You talk ball. And basically this is all I'm good for, is I love to talk ball. So I brought those guys in. Then I did a show with Peter Golenbach, and Ian, you will attest to the fact that just talking to Peter, given what an incredible icon he is in baseball journalism, is one of the thrills of my life. I mean, it's one of the greatest interviews I had, and it took me maybe 6 months to ask Peter, who had a great time on the show as well, whether or not he would consider doing a podcast show, a weekly podcast show. And there's a picture on my website of me with my hands in the air. It was taken, it was kind of a paparazzi. I called Tally my little paparazzi. She came in with the camera just as I got off the phone with Peter. I asked him that, and he said, "Sure, give me the details." I said, "Whoa." I said, I could do something. So then I have a giant show, Dodger show, Peter Golenbach. Well, through all this, one of the people I met was a SABRE, and that's the Society of Baseball Research superstar. His name was Alan Blumpkin. And Alan has come on the show. I call him on this network, I call him my Tommy Heinrich. He's the solid guy who is absolutely, he tells me, and he downplays it, he's got a photographic memory. He memorized every baseball card in order, the number of the card, the 1952 set, when he was a little kid. When they came, he wasn't a little kid. He was a kid. He's a little older than we are, Ian. And he remembers everything. He's got a passion. He was a Yankee fan growing up. He went to school in Pittsburgh. He became a Pirate fan. So I've got him on. Got an A's show going. Originally, I did the A's show alone. Athletics, baseball, past, present, and future. Billy Martin Jr. co-hosted a few episodes with me, and I finally found a terrific permanent co-host. His name is Patrick Tracy. He's an old acquaintance of mine from Alameda, a maven, an incredible, like you are, Ian, an incredible fountain of information. And Patrick had to go on the DL. He's got a bad back that is really bad. It renders him in pain an awful lot of the time, and he just can't commit to doing anything that is on a regular basis. He doesn't know how he's going to feel from moment to moment. And Patrick's had to drop out. Ian Kahanowitz, who came to the station with me today, introduces me to Nancy Finley, the niece of Charlie O. And Nancy and I hit it off, and she has become the co-host on the Athletics show. I'm doing this for a while, and I realize I love it. I love baseball, but there are things I miss talking about that aren't baseball and aren't politics and social stuff. One of them is the other sports that I grew up watching: football, basketball, hockey. I'm not doing anything on the network for them, so I get together with Hal Bach, an Associated Press head baseball writer, but a maven. Used to work for the New York Rangers, knows all the other sports, was in New York for all these many years, and I had Hal on as a guest when he wrote two times. He wrote a book that coincided with the Cubs winning the World Series. Wasn't designed to do that, but his serendipity was that they won the World Series last year, and his book came out on the Chicago Cubs. Terrific book. He's very articulate on the air, and by the time his next book comes out, his 28th book, I might add, 29th book, something like that, which is banned about all the baseball players and executives and even a team doctor who was banned from baseball, and even George Steinbrenner banned from baseball. Very interesting. I'm talking to Hal. I said, well, I wonder if you'd like to do a show on some of the other sports on the network. He goes, yeah. I named it Talking Vintage Sports from Nedick's at the Old Garden on 48th Street. It's probably the longest name any show ever had, but that's all right. My network, I'll have a long name on, and that show has been terrific. Alan Blumpkin comes on as a regular. George Case comes on. George Case III is the son of George Case Jr., who was a terrific ball player for the Washington Senators, among other teams, in the post or pre and World War II. During the war, they kept baseball going, and George came on 2 or 3 times, and I said, I'd love to do a show with you about Washington. So, and I combine it with the Twins, the old Washington Senators and the Minnesota Twins. Got Ronnie. Remember we talked about Ronnie Rabinovich. He lives in Minneapolis. He comes on and is on as a co-host, and we bring an absolute Minnesota Twin maven. His name is Chad Rubin, and he's the third man in the booth, and he brings us up to date on a weekly basis on what the Twins are up to. They've had a tremendous year this year, playing well above what was expected, so it's been fun from that standpoint. And as I say, George Case III joins us on that show. So, Alan Blumpkin, who I bring in, is my Tommy Heinrich. He appears on all of our many of the different shows. Introduces me to the writer and his long-term friend, David Nemec, who writes baseball history books, trivia books, is the godfather of trivia, according to Saber, and his books were tremendous. I'm reading his books in the 70s, and all of a sudden he's on my network doing a show on baseball history. So I got this thing going where we got Peter Golenbach is doing Golenbach University, and Alan Blumpkin and I combine with him on a weekly basis with and Peter named us basically the 3 baseball Michiganers. We're nuts. We can talk this stuff all day, and Ian fits right in with the craziness. And so I've got that show going. Weighted Donuts was an offshoot of the New York show that Wayne Unger does, and it's got the New York spirit of sports talk the way it was designed to be. No bullshit, just direct. Wayne is a New York Yankee fan, and the show you would think revolves around that, given the fact that his boyhood hero was Elston Howard, who invented a product called Weighted Donuts, which they're lead donuts, literally, that fit around the bat, and you swing the bat with the weighted donut. You take the weighted donut in warm-ups and in the on-deck circle. You take the weighted donut off, and it's like swinging a lighter bat. And the late Elston Howard invented that, and Wayne honors his memory because, again, Elston was Wayne's boyhood hero by naming the show after him. And that's a terrific show. What am I forgetting, Ian? Anybody that you can think of that has a show on my network that I haven't babbled about? I still do my show. This is it. It's Flying High Over the Zone, and I do it on a weekly basis. Funny part is I talk about baseball in about 60% of the shows that I do. Also, again, I talk about social injustice, legalization of marijuana, all kinds of stuff that's society related, and I get to talk politics a little bit. I get to bemoan the fact that both sides are the same, that you can't fight Republicans with Democrats, and you can't fight Democrats with Republicans because they play good cop, bad cop with us every 4 years. Now, that said, Trump is an anatomy, whatever that word is. He's like uncharted waters, and a lot of people are hoping and surmising that he's a cuckoo and will implode and go down the tubes, and they sometimes forget that when they impeach Trump, they damn better impeach Pence. They better find a connect to Pence too, because if he takes over, you're going to have, he's a well-organized politician, and all the things that Trump talks about to mess up our lives, he's really having a hard time implementing. He's having a hard time implementing destroying Planned Parenthood because, as I was one of the first to say, the public sector will join in and they will contribute tax-deductible dollars to keep Planned Parenthood alive, and they have. They've come through. He's had trouble screwing up health care because, by the nature of the beast, there are representatives in Congress that don't want to be associated, don't want to go back to the constituency and say, you can no longer have insurance, pre-existing conditions, all that stuff, you're out there. You're on your own. So, but if Pence comes in, I look at Pence being much more evil. He's much more organized in his thought process. He really wants to destroy us and has the capabilities of doing it because he's played the political game. And he realizes that you have to go across the aisle, either aisle, with your brand of bullshit. The Democrats go across the aisle trying to sell their brand of bullshit to the Republicans and vice versa. So, that's my show. And I'm drawing a blank. I'm away from the computer. I can't think of the other shows on the network. I think I've covered them all. And I want from you, your Ian Kahanowitz, I want to, because I know what goes on in a podcaster's head, I want you to tell me about how cathartic it is to broadcast on a podcast network. Tell me your experience and why you're enjoying it so much.
Well, for me, it was an accident to even get into podcasting. And I'll tell you why. When I got sick with diabetes at around the age of 40, 41, my feet started to go. And I've had holes in it and everything. I've had 7 surgeries in the last 5 years, and I couldn't walk. And one day I'm sitting around watching ESPN, and I said, you know something? This is awful. It was the year of 2014 when San Francisco met the Kansas City Royals. But before that, in September, every hour was another focus on the Kansas City Royals. And I was getting sick of watching the same thing that I watched an hour before. So what I did was I created a Facebook page called The Dugout. And if you go to The Dugout, it has over 10,000 members in there. And I don't even post in there anymore. But I'll tell you, for people who do post in it, before ESPN or Sports Channel or any networks gets information, you got folks from almost every organization in baseball, scouts and inside folks posting what's going to happen before it's actually released to the public. And I think that was a gift I gave to folks, to go in there, have your own say, and talk about your own teams, because it's just not one team. Even if your team is in last place or in first, everyone should know about it. And what happened from there was I was asked, because of the success of it, I was asked to do other websites. And so I did the Historical Negro League site, which we have ex-baseball players that were from that league in the site, sons, daughters, family members, those who patroned the games back in the 40s and 50s, and we have a lot of historians in there. On the heels of that, I was told, maybe you can do a Yankee Facebook page. Maybe you could do a Dead Ball period web page. And so I did. And so my name got around, and I saw Alan Blumpkin was on my sites. And then I did a podcast in Detroit, and I was on Detroit radio. For some reason, up in the Midwest, my shows are very popular, and my sites are very popular. And the guy's like, well, you know something, man, it was the highest-rated show we've ever had. And he's like, how would you like your own podcast? And I said, fine. And so I didn't want anyone as a co-host, because a lot of people like to have the co-host. I like to fly solo, which is a rarity podcast. And I said, fine. And so I started Genesis. And what I wanted to do was, in light of what your network was doing, is educating folks. And that lasted for about 8 months until April of 2016, when he retired, my producer. The network went down. I went in for surgery in November. Almost lost my foot in my life, came back with full strength, and then you and I had a conversation, and you said, well, would you like to join the network? And I said, well, Ralph, I already had my show. I could just, continue it, like, one show going off one network and going on to another. And the response has been good. Now,
smooth transition, Ian.
Yeah, it was.
For a while, you were hooked up. For a while, I had you hooked up with Mark Weiss, which reminds me that he branched off and has a show with former Major League ball player, pitcher, and an old friend of mine from way back, who I reacquainted myself with, Mark Littell. And that's the show that was that I didn't talk about before. I knew there was one other show to talk about. But Mark worked with you for a while, and you guys were terrific together. But as you mentioned, you're more of an independent guy. For one reason or another, you've always been the Lone Ranger in life. Am I right about that?
You are, and I'll tell you why. Growing up, again, in New York City, my parents, I didn't trust much because of their whole, marriage and divorce and all these things and all the lies that I've exposed. I educated myself, and how I did that was I constantly read. I got myself through college by working, jobs where everyone was getting cars. I was just barely cutting the bills. And then I went
Ian, would you speak up just a little bit?
Sure. And, I went into law school and worked 2 jobs through law school, became a lawyer. And, by that time, I had my master's in history right after college, went to law school, and then I got my, master's in tax and accounting and became, a successful tax attorney until my health failed. But then what happened was, I applied that same concept to my podcasts. And it's very difficult when you are a sports writer, as in addition to being, say, an educator. Because if you read books from those who are in the game, as opposed to those who are an educator, like Gerald C. Wood, who I'm doing a book with now on the whole 1926-1927 Ty Cobb for Speaker affair, Their books, I find, are more what I was used to in the educational realms. You know, sports writers tend to write for the layperson. Educators write for the educated public. It's a different, game. But you could see the words that are used, the sources that are cited. It's a different realm. And so what I bring to my baseball shows is I get these authors and former players on, and I do my homework for every show. And you've been publishing my shows all through the summer. I didn't even have to do a podcast besides one or two this summer because I had such a backlog of it coming up to the June season. And what I do is I'm on McFarland's list. I'm on University of Nebraska's list, a couple of other publications lists, and I get all the brand new books that come out before they even come out on the market. So it gives me a chance to read, understand what happened in that time period, and I go back in time. I take the time machine back to various points of baseball. Now, a couple of them are going back into the 1880s to the American Association League. Not a lot of people know about that. In the fall, we're going to have, a show on the Cleveland Spiders, who ended up being the Indians at a later time. But who knows about the Cleveland Spiders? We're going to go into that. We're going to go into a lot of dead ball stuff. We're going to go into 1930. A lot of people don't know about the 1930 season, and all of a sudden, why hitters were just pounding the ball. But there's a new book that came out, titled 30. We're going to have the author on the show. We're going to get into so much stuff regarding 1960s baseball with the whole Los Angeles Dodgers and fighting Mr. O'Malley himself. We have both Drysdale and Koufax wanting more money, which literally led the way for Marvin Miller and the whole Players Union and what they did for baseball. There's a lot of shows. We're going to go back to the 20s again. We're going to go through the 30s. I got a few people who have written material on Hank Greenberg, so we're going to go through that. I have another show that's going to have a great show that I've just read, a brand new book. He's going to be on my show about the whole City of Darkness of Detroit in that 1934 year when Mickey Cochran and the Tigers were able to pull off a huge victory. And what happened in Detroit, you had an organization like the Ku Klux Klan riding around and putting fear into the city. So there's a lot of baseball knowledge. There's a lot of things that folks don't know, and that's what my shows hone in on, the unique, the stuff that's not talked about every day. And that's what I try to do, is to bring to baseball a different angle.
Beautiful. Can everybody out there, if you could just imagine how proud I am of myself that I put this together with these great guys. And we all have fun. We guest on each other's shows, and we learn from each other. And I'm loving it. And I'm almost tearing up here, Ian. Thanks for being on, my friend. This was a State of the Network show. I'm Ralph Tyko. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And it's kind of terrific. Thanks for being here, Ian.
You're
just
welcome.
Made my morning.
You're very welcome, sir.
All right. We will talk soon. And to those of you out there, I'm going to end the show in the most simplest of way I can. Keep on keeping on, everybody. Adios.